way we go about our society. And of course, one of the first points that has been made by the vast majority of people, and these are particularly people who usually do not know any trans people that make this statement, and that's that we have to protect women and children from trans people, or the way they often term it is, even if they say transgendereds, or they're really talking about, and they do often say, they term them as men in dresses, right? We have to protect women and children from men in dresses, right? And, I mean, look, counterpoint right out the gate. Trans women are women, not men. There have been, and there have been no instances that I can find of actual trans people, specifically trans women, perpetrating violence against cis women in a public bathroom. In fact, it's trans women who are the targets or victims of violence at the hands of cis people in public facilities. There was a Williams Institute report in 2013 that said, quote, roughly 70% of trans people have reported being denied entrance, assaulted, or harassed while trying to use a restroom. Just trying to use a restroom. So I don't really see, I get that this is a fear-mongering tactic, but trans women are not the ones. You're not seeing articles come out about a trans woman walking into a bathroom and, assaulting or beating up or even threatening a cis woman in the bathroom. Or children, okay? In fact, it is usually the opposite. A cis person will see a trans woman in a bathroom, freak out, try to force them to leave, and usually it is, it ends in some type of assault or altercation of some sort. The other point that is often, made is that, okay, let's take trans people out of the mix, that this is about protecting women and children from assault, rape, and harm, right? We're not gonna point the finger at trans people right now. We're just gonna make a blanket statement that having this law protects women and children from assault, rape, and harm. And honestly, this is one of the ones that has frustrated me the most, because we live in a rape culture to where if this was truly the point, it's so far off base, because if this were really about protection, our society wouldn't constantly question a woman's claim of sexual abuse. What she was wearing, where she was walking, what she had been drinking, what she had said or done to cause the attack, okay? We wouldn't force rape victims to pay for their own rape kits, okay? In 2014, CBS found that 13 states had been found to charge the victim of rape for the collection of evidence to investigate and prosecute those crimes. And at the end of 2015, there were still several states that had not ended this practice. And that is obscene. So if we're really talking about protecting women, then let's actually do something to stop assaults on women, stop rapes on women, and let's not further victimize them by forcing them to relive this tragedy over and over again, by forcing them to relive this violence over and over again, by finding some way to blame the victim and forcing them to pay for the investigation of a crime that they had zero responsibility in having a hand in it being committed. And there also wouldn't be thousands of backlogged rape kits. To add insult to injury, can you imagine shelling out your own money to pay to have a rape kit collected, only to find that your self-paid rape kit is collecting dust in an evidence room years later, along with hundreds of thousands of others? In 2014, it was estimated that there were around 400,000 rape kits that had been backlogged. Now, a number of states have been making reforms and working to end this backlog, but even now, there are currently 30 states reporting a backlog of close to 145,000 backlogged kits. 145,000 in 30 states. That means that there are 20 other states in the District of Columbia that either aren't reporting their backlog or have no method of tracking them. Now, if you want more information about where the backlog exists, there's actually an interactive map and tons of stats over at endthebacklog.com, which is where I got a lot of this information for about the number of cases that have been backlogged. So we're questioning women's allegations of rape. We're forcing them to pay for their own rape kits. We're then not even processing those rape kits. And then, if this was really about protection, again, an Oklahoma court wouldn't have just said that forced oral sex is not considered rape if the victim is unconscious. Specifically, the ruling stated, forcible sodomy cannot occur where a victim is so intoxicated as to be completely unconscious at the time of the sexual act of oral copulation. That is ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. Now, I get that what the court is saying is that we have this patchwork of laws that don't cover this one particular instance, but I find it very hard to believe that this is the first time that something like this has ever come up in the state of Oklahoma, and that there isn't some kind of previous case that set precedent to be used for the court to just say, no, we can't go after this. We can't do anything about it. Sorry. Right? It's ridiculous to me. Now, we started this with the point of all of this is to protect women and children from rape and assault and violence. Okay? And we've talked about all the different ways in which rape culture is just reinforced, and that if this was really about protection, that we wouldn't have these things, right? That these would be things that we'd focus our energy on things where it's necessary. The next thing that I kind of want to point out is that if we're really talking about protecting women and children, we should look at the fact that there are currently no bills to ban convicted sex offenders from using public restrooms. There's an estimated 700,000-ish trans people in the United States, though given the stigma of coming out publicly, that number is likely much higher, or at least a bit higher. The real number, is likely higher than that. In contrast, as of March 31st, 2016, there are over 805,000 registered sex offenders in the United States. So when a convicted sex offender is released from prison, he or she is immediately able to use public facilities while a trans person can't. Tell me how that protects the general public from known sex offenders. Because if the bill is to protect people, why are we targeting trans people instead of people that have actually been convicted of harming folks before? These laws, they simply keep people with an M on their birth certificate in the men's room and those with an F on their birth certificate in the women's room. This doesn't protect boys from other men or girls from other women. It is a fact that there are male sex offenders that abuse boys and that there are female sex offenders that abuse girls. And if we take a step back and look at all the violence, not just sexual abuse, the stats rise even further. Just a handful of days ago, a 16-year-old girl was beaten to death in a school bathroom by 3 other girls. There was an altercation, and then she was jumped. And she died. These laws don't do anything to protect any of those people. The people that have been abused before, this law does not protect them from sex offenders that have been convicted and released. This law doesn't protect, women from each other or men from other men. It doesn't do any of that. If this was really about protection, there are real things we can focus our energy on. Namely, a bunch of the stuff that I just mentioned. Let's end the backlog. Let's stop questioning women when they bring real stories of sexual abuse and physical abuse at the hands of strangers and loved ones and husbands and fathers and uncles and grandfathers and whoever it is. There are things that we can really do to protect women and children. These laws aren't them. Now, the next point that I hear come from a lot of people, and usually these are people that do know trans people, right? They know trans folks. They know that trans people aren't the problem, but they say it's not the trans people I worry about. It's the perverts who will exploit this law to gain access to women's public bathrooms to assault or otherwise harm women and children. Now, straight out the gate, generally speaking, rapists and sex offenders don't really usually care about the law. A law is not what is stopping them from entering a place they shouldn't be or doing something they shouldn't do. There's nothing stopping them from going into a women's bathroom now. Public bathrooms aren't some magical safe space. There is no bouncer at the door. They can just walk in. Okay? That's not a thing. Laws that allow trans people to use the bathroom that matches their gender identity doesn't protect sex offenders from the law when they assault, rape, or otherwise harm someone else in the bathroom. And that includes peeping. Those things are still illegal, regardless of where you are. They are still breaking the law, and they can still be arrested. There's nothing in these laws that the lack of having them there protects people that are doing this. Those perverts that so many people have asked me about, and yes, it has been multiple, there's nothing in the lack of these laws that protects them. And there's nothing in full equality of public spaces in those laws that protects them. It doesn't matter whether you're cis or trans or otherwise. If you go into a bathroom and commit a crime, it is still a crime. If you don't go into the bathroom and commit that crime, it is still a crime. There's nothing about being in the bathroom that makes it somehow safe. And there's nothing that is harboring folks with equal access to correct public facilities. Now add to that there has been no increase in exploitation in places that have instituted anti-discrimination laws. The staff attorney at the ACLU LGBT project was quoted as saying, over 200 municipalities and 18 states have non-discrimination laws protecting transgender people's access to facilities consistent with the gender they live every day. And then went on to say that none of those jurisdictions have seen a rise in sexual violence or other public safety issues due to non-discrimination laws. Assaulting another person in a restroom or changing room remains against the law in every single state. End quote. Now, the person that made that quote's name is Chase Strangio, I believe. I apologize, Chase, if I have mispronounced your last name. Chase, as I mentioned, is the staff attorney at the ACLU LGBT project. Tony Troop is a spokesperson for Jane Doe, Inc., which is the statewide sexual assault victims organization in Massachusetts. She was quoted as saying, quote, "The argument that providing transgender rights will result in an increase of sexual violence against women or men in public bathrooms is beyond specious. The only people at risk are the transgender men and women whose rights to self-determination, dignity, and freedom of violence are too often denied. We have not heard of any problems since the passage of the law in Massachusetts in 2011, nor do we expect this to be a problem." End quote. And, you know, the other issue that I take with this, that perverts might use this to exploit, they exploit this law to gain access. Barring an entire population from using the restroom congruent with their gender identity to keep a very few offenders out is ridiculous, discriminatory, and it punishes people that have nothing to do with the problem. It's assuming that most of the people that claim that we have to enact these laws that keep hundreds of thousands of trans people from using the correct bathroom are the same people that claim we should never take away law-abiding citizens' guns just because a few people decide to use their guns for violence. And honestly, even that parallel isn't really accurate, because gun owners and those who commit gun-related violence have the gun in common. Sex offenders come in all shapes, sizes, ages, and sexes. The only commonality that sex offenders have with the larger trans population is that they are both human. And by that logic, all people should be banned from all public bathrooms. And now listen, I know that sounds ridiculous, banning all public bathrooms, but I wouldn't put it past some municipalities. There are now counties in Alabama that said, well, if you're going to make us perform gay weddings, we're just not going to perform any weddings. So rather than grant equal rights to all couples, they stripped rights equally from all couples. The lengths people will go to deny true equality and progress is sometimes laughable and quite honestly infuriating.